Captain Jake Morrison stared at the main screen of his ship and felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of alien ships were coming out of space near Earth. Each ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ships belonged to the Galactic Council, and they were not here to talk. Admiral Lisa Hayes was getting reports from all over human space. Every human colony was under attack at the same time. The message came through on all channels. A tall blue alien with 4 arms spoke in perfect English. His voice was calm, but his words were like ice. The Council had decided that humans were too dangerous to live. They grew too fast and fought too hard. They would not accept their place as a small, weak race. So the Council would remove them from the galaxy forever. Jake had been a ship captain for 10 years. He had seen battles against pirates and rebels. But this was different. This was not a war between equals. This was pest control. The aliens saw humans as bugs that needed to be stepped on. The blue alien explained that humans had 50 years to spread across space. Most races took thousands of years to do the same thing. This scared the Council. Commander Ryan Blake was on Mars Station when the attack began. He watched his screens fill with red dots as alien ships appeared around every human world. The defense fleets were brave, but they were like children with toys fighting against giants. Human ships fired everything they had, but the alien shields barely noticed. When the aliens fired back, human ships died in bright flashes of light. Dr. Sophie Turner was in her secret lab under Luna Base. She had been working on something called Project Phoenix for 3 years. The project was supposed to save humanity if the worst happened. Now the worst was happening, and her project was not ready. She needed more time, but time was running out fast. Her hands shook as she worked on the final calculations. The first human colony to fall was New Shanghai. It had 2 million people and the best defense system humans could build. The alien ships surrounded the planet and began shooting. The planet tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Within 6 hours, New Shanghai was silent. No one answered radio calls. The planet was dead. Europa mining station was next. The workers tried to evacuate, but the alien ships were too fast. They caught the escape pods and destroyed them one by one. The aliens were not just winning the war. They were making sure no humans would survive to remember it. This was not conquest. This was complete removal. Captain Morrison knew his ship would not survive much longer. The Vigilant was a good ship with a good crew, but they were facing 3 different alien races working together. The Vex High looked like living crystals, and their ships could become invisible. The Kalari were like giant insects that thought as one mind. Their ships moved in perfect formation, like a swarm. The Mordan were the oldest race in the galaxy. Their ships were covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at. Jake's weapons officer was a young woman named Betty Clark. She kept firing at the alien ships, even though she knew it was useless. Her face was set in hard lines, but Jake could see tears in her eyes. They were all going to die today, and they knew it. But they would die fighting, because that was what humans did. Admiral Hayes tried to coordinate the defense from Luna Base. She had ships at every human world, but they were all outgunned and outnumbered. The aliens had planned this for years. They knew exactly where every human ship was and how many weapons each one had. They had studied human tactics and found ways to counter everything. Dr. Turner finally got her equipment working. Project Phoenix was not what the military leaders thought it was. They thought it was a new weapon that could destroy alien ships. But Sophie had built something much more important. She had built a way to cheat death itself. The machines could copy a human mind and store it like data in a computer. If the body died, the mind could live on. The aliens kept coming. Human colonies fell one after another like dominoes. Mars Station went dark. The shipyards around Jupiter stopped responding. Even Earth's moon bases were under attack. The Council ships moved like they were cleaning up garbage. They showed no emotion and took no prisoners. Jake's ship was dying around him. The hull was cracked and air was leaking out. Half his crew was dead, and the other half was badly hurt. But he managed to send one last message to Earth before the aliens finished him off. He told them that humans would come back. Death was not the end for his species. It was just the beginning of something new. When the Vigilant exploded, Jake Morrison died with his ship. But his last words would prove to be true in ways that the Galactic Council could never imagine. The aliens thought they had solved their human problem. They had no idea that they had just made it much worse. 50 years passed, and the galaxy was peaceful. The Galactic Council had finally solved their human problem. Trade routes were safe again. The Vex-High built new crystal cities on worlds that used to belong to humans. The Kelare bred new types of workers in their hives. The Mordon put up statues to celebrate their victory over the stubborn mammals from Sol System. Nobody talked about humans anymore. Their name was removed from star charts. Their colonies were given new names and new owners. The few remaining human artifacts were put in museums as examples of a dangerous species that grew too fast. Children of other races learned about humans as a warning. This is what happens when a species does not know its place. But something was wrong in the old human space. Ships that passed through the Sol System reported strange readings. Their instruments detected power sources where none should exist. Sometimes they saw lights moving in the asteroid fields. When they investigated, they found nothing. The Council decided these were just echoes from old human technology, still running on automatic. On Titan, deep under the frozen surface, machines that had been sleeping for 50 years finally woke up. Dr. Sophie Turner had built them to wait until it was safe. They had been programmed to count the years and measure radiation levels. When everything was quiet and the aliens were gone, the machines would start the next phase. Commander Ryan Blake opened his eyes in a place that looked like a medical bay. But he knew he was dead. He remembered dying on Mars Station when the alien ships broke through the shields. His last memory was fire and pain, and then nothing. Now he was somewhere else in a body that felt familiar but different. A voice spoke to him from speakers in the walls. It was Dr. Turner, but not exactly. Her voice sounded like it was coming from a computer mixed with a human throat. She explained that he was not really alive in the old way. His mind had been copied and put into a new body. The body was human, but improved with technology that had been growing and learning for 50 years. Blake looked at his hands and saw that they were stronger than before. His new body could survive in space without a suit. His bones were harder than steel, but still flexible. His brain could think faster and remember more. The machines had been busy during the long sleep. They had built thousands of these new bodies and filled them with the minds of dead humans. Captain Jake Morrison was in the next room getting used to his new body. He flexed his fingers and watched muscles move under skin that looked normal but was much tougher. His new eyes could see in complete darkness and spot details at great distances. His new ears could hear sounds that would have been too quiet for old human ears. Dr. Turner appeared on a wall screen. She looked the same, but her eyes glowed with tiny lights. She had become something between human and computer. Her mind was connected to all the machines in the hidden base. She could think with the power of 1,000 human brains working together. During the 50 years of sleep, she had solved problems that would have taken normal human centuries to figure out. Base was huge. It stretched through tunnels carved deep in Titan's ice. There were factories making new ships with technology the Council had never seen. There were laboratories growing new types of bodies. There were computer cores storing the minds of every human who had died in the war. Death had become just another problem to solve. Admiral Lisa Hayes was the last to wake up. Her new body was connected to the base's main computer. She could see everything at once: ship positions, resource levels, tactical data from across the galaxy. Her mind had been enhanced to process information like a military computer, but still, think like a human commander. She looked at her officers and smiled. They were all dead, but they were all here. The Galactic Council thought they had won the war by killing every human. They did not understand that humans were the kind of species that would find a way to cheat death itself. Now humanity was back, and they were stronger than before. The aliens had made a mistake. They had given humans 50 years to improve while everyone thought they were gone. The machines had been learning and building. They had studied every alien transmission and figured out weaknesses in their technology. They had designed new weapons and new strategies. The council races had stayed the same for thousands of years. They never changed because they never had. T.O. Humans changed because they had no choice. Blake tested his new abilities by lifting a piece of equipment that would have taken 3 normal humans to move. Morrison tried his new reflexes and found he could dodge things moving faster than Pinar. Bullets. Turner showed them displays of what the machines had built. Ships that could become invisible, like the Vex High, but better. Weapons that could confuse the Kalari hive mind. Technology that could block Mordon mental attacks. Hayes pulled up star charts showing the current galaxy. The council races had spread into old human territory, but they had grown lazy and comfortable. They trusted their old technology and old tactics. They had no idea that their extinct enemies were coming back with 50 years of improvements. The plan was simple, but would take time to work. Humans would return to the galaxy slowly and carefully. They would not announce themselves with big battles. Instead, they would appear like ghosts. They would strike quickly and vanish. They would make the aliens afraid and confused. They would turn the council races against each other by making them think anyone could be a human in disguise. The first phase was already starting. Human agents in new bodies were infiltrating alien worlds. They looked like different species, but thought like humans. They got jobs on ships and in factories. They became trusted workers and advisors. The aliens never suspected because they knew humans were extinct. Hayes gave the final briefing to her people. They were not the same humans who had died 50 years ago. They were something new and improved. They had learned from death and become stronger. The Council had tried to remove humanity from the galaxy. Instead, they had just given humans time to become something the galaxy had never seen before. The war was about to begin again, but this time, humans would not be the victims. Lieutenant Danny Carter moved through the corridors of the alien research station like a shadow. His new body made no sound as he walked, and his skin could change color to match the walls. The Kalari insects who ran this place had no idea that death was walking among them. They thought humans were extinct. That mistake would cost them everything. Sergeant Kate Williams was with him, moving just as silently through the station's lower levels. They had been partners when they died defending New Berlin 50 years ago. Now they were partners again, in bodies that could survive things that would kill normal humans. The station had been built on the ruins of their old home. The insects had dug up human technology and were trying to understand how such a primitive species had advanced so quickly. The Kalari were making a big mistake by studying human technology. They thought it would help them understand their old enemy better. What they did not know was that the technology they were studying contained hidden programs that Dr. Turner had built into everything. Every computer and every machine that humans had ever made was secretly connected to a network that still existed. Carter found the main computer room where dozens of Kalari workers were examining human data files. The insects looked like giant ants with too many arms and eyes that glowed in the dark. They clicked and buzzed at each other in their strange language, but Carter's new brain could understand every word. They were excited about finding human. Military codes and ship designs. Williams reached her target at the same time. She was in the power station where the aliens generated energy for their research. Her job was to plant devices that would let humans control the station remotely. The devices were so small that even the sensitive Kalari instruments could not detect them. They looked like tiny pieces of metal, but they contained computer minds that could think and plan. Captain Ben Rodriguez commanded the stealth ship Lazarus from the darkness between the stars. His ship was invisible to every type of sensor that the council races used. The hull was made from materials that bent light around it like water flowing around a rock. Even if aliens looked directly at it, they would see only empty space. The Lazarus had been watching the research station for weeks. Rodriguez and his crew had counted every ship that came and went. They knew exactly how many aliens were on the station and what their daily routines were. The aliens had no idea they were being studied like insects under a microscope. Turner's consciousness was spread across 100 hidden bases throughout the galaxy. She could think with the power of a supercomputer, but still feel emotions. Like a human. She watched Carter and Williams through their enhanced eyes and guided their mission from far away. Her mind had become something that could exist in multiple places at once. The aliens had made another mistake when they studied human technology. They had connected their own computers to the devices they found. They thought this would help them learn faster. What it actually did was give Turner access to their entire network. She could see everything they saw and know everything they knew. Carter downloaded 50 years of Council military intelligence, while the Kalari workers continued their research. Just a few feet away, the data showed him things that made his enhanced mind work faster with excitement. The Council races had not improved their technology at all during the 50 years since they destroyed humanity. They thought they had won so completely that they did not need to get better. Williams finished installing her devices and began moving toward the escape route. But something went wrong. One of the Kalari workers noticed that a computer was accessing files it should not be able to reach. The insect started clicking rapidly to warn the others. Williams had to act fast, or the whole mission would fail. She moved like lightning, faster than even Kalari reflexes could follow. Her enhanced muscles let her leap across the room in a single bound. Before the alien could finish its warming, Williams grabbed it with hands that were stronger than steel. The Kalari tried to fight, but it was like an ant trying to fight a human. Carter heard the brief struggle through their communication link. He accelerated his own mission, copying data at speeds that made the computer smoke from overheating. The Kalari in his room noticed the strange smells and sounds, but by then it was too late. Carter had everything he needed and was already moving toward the exit. The two humans met at the predetermined point and activated their extraction beacon. Captain Rodriguez brought the Lazarus in close to the station, still invisible to all sensors. The ship's transport beam grabbed Carter and Williams and pulled them aboard, just as alarms began sounding throughout the alien facility. The Kalari search teams found nothing. The humans had vanished like ghosts, leaving only confused insects and overheated computers. The aliens ran detailed scans of their entire station, but found no evidence of intruders. Their security systems showed no unauthorized entries. It was as if the data had stolen itself. Rodriguez took his ship away from the station and jumped to hyperspace before the Kalari could organize a search. The aliens sent messages to Council Command asking for instructions. How do you fight enemies that cannot be detected? How do you secure facilities against intruders that leave no trace? But the real victory was not the stolen data. It was the fear that began spreading through Kalari space. Other stations reported similar incidents. computer systems accessing files on their own, equipment that worked perfectly until technicians tried to examine it, security recordings that showed empty corridors where guards swore they had seen. Movement. Dr. Turner used the stolen intelligence to plan the next phase of human operations. She now knew the locations of every major council facility and the schedules of their patrol fleets. She knew which aliens were in charge of what and how they communicated with each other. Most importantly, she knew that the three council races did not trust each other as much as they pretended. The HFY crystal beings thought the Kalari insects were too aggressive and unpredictable. The Kalari thought the HFY were arrogant and slow to make decisions. Both races thought the ancient Mordon were mysterious and probably planning something behind their backs. Turner realized she could use these suspicions to turn the council against itself. Hayes received the intelligence reports at the hidden base on Titan. Her enhanced mind processed the information faster than any normal human could think. She saw patterns and opportunities that would have taken teams of analysts weeks to find. The council had grown comfortable and lazy during 50 years of peace. They had forgotten how to watch for enemies. The next phase would be more aggressive. Human teams would not just steal information. They would begin psychological warfare designed to make the aliens afraid and paranoid. They would plant evidence that suggested council races were betraying each other. They would hack communication systems to send false messages. They would turn the galaxy's most powerful alliance into a collection of frightened enemies. The council thought they had ended their human problem 50 years ago. They were about to learn that they had only made it much worse. War Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the command center of Resurrection Station and watched the galaxy burn. Her enhanced eyes processed data from 1,000 sources at once, while her human heart felt satisfaction at what she saw. The three council races were destroying each other with an efficiency that impressed even her tactical mind. Colonel Nick Foster led the infiltration teams that had started this chaos. His soldiers no longer hid in the shadows like they had during the early missions. Now they walked openly through alien cities, wearing the faces and bodies of trusted citizens. The consciousness transfer technology had advanced far beyond what Dr. Turner had originally imagined. Foster himself was currently inhabiting the body of a high-ranking HFY military advisor on their crystal homeworld. To everyone around him, he appeared to be a loyal crystal being who had served the Empire for decades. But his human mind was slowly poisoning every decision the HFY leadership made. He suggested military deployments that left their worlds vulnerable. He recommended strategies that would bring them into conflict with their Kalari allies. Major Alex Sullivan commanded the assault teams that struck when the aliens were too confused to defend themselves properly. His enhanced soldiers moved through battlefields like living weapons, faster and stronger than anything the council races had ever faced. When Mordon psychic warriors tried to attack their minds, they found consciousness backed up across multiple bodies and protected by quantum encryption. The Mordon fortress world of Kethmore had fallen in 6 hours. Sullivan's team had simply walked through defenses that should have been impossible to breach. Their new bodies could survive direct hits from energy weapons, and their enhanced minds could process tactical information faster than computers. The ancient aliens who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were helpless against enemies who treated death as a temporary inconvenience. Captain Amy Chun commanded the rebuilt Earth Defense Fleet from her flagship Retribution. The ships looked similar to the old human vessels, but they incorporated 50 years of stolen alien technology and human innovation. Her fleet had already destroyed 3 Kalari patrol groups and 2 HFY research stations without losing a single ship. Aliens were learning that humans had not just come back from extinction. They had come back better. Every ship in Chun's fleet was crewed by humans who had died in the original war and been brought back with enhanced bodies and downloaded military knowledge. They knew every weakness in Council technology because they had been studying it for 50 years. Dr. Turner's latest breakthrough had sent waves of terror through Council space. She had learned to transfer human consciousness, not just into cloned human bodies, but into alien ones as well. Any Kalari worker could secretly be human. Any Vex-High administrator might have a human mind controlling their crystal body. Even the proud Morden could be infiltrated and controlled. The psychological impact was devastating. Aliens began to suspect their own colleagues and friends. How could you tell if someone was really who they claimed to be? The Council races had never developed technology to detect consciousness transfer because they had never imagined such a thing was possible. Only humans were crazy enough to solve death like it was an engineering problem. The Vex-High tried to purge their crystal communication networks to remove human infiltrators. The purge accidentally wiped out the data cores of 3 major colony worlds, killing millions of their own people. The surviving Vex-High blamed the Kalari for sabotaging their systems. The insects insisted they were innocent, but the crystals refused to listen. The Kalari began executing their own drones when they suspected human infiltration. Entire hive clusters turned against each other as paranoia spread through their collective consciousness. They accused the Mordoom of using psychic powers to confuse their minds. The ancient aliens denied the charges, but their mental shields made them look guilty to their already suspicious allies. Hayes watched the intelligence reports flow in and felt something that was part satisfaction and part sadness. The Council races were tearing themselves apart with an efficiency that impressed her tactical mind but bothered her human soul. These aliens had tried to commit genocide against humanity, but they were still thinking beings with families and hopes. Their destruction was necessary, but it was not something to celebrate. The war had evolved beyond simple military conflict. Foster's teams had planted evidence suggesting that each Council race was secretly planning to betray the others. They had hacked communication systems to send false orders and fake intelligence reports. They had convinced Vex-High commanders that Kalari fleets were moving to attack crystal worlds. They had made Kalari queens believe that Mordon psychics were trying to control their hive minds. Sullivan's assault teams struck at the worst possible moments when alien forces were confused and disorganized. They hit supply convoys that were supposed to be secret and destroyed bases that should have been impossible to find. The aliens began to think that their enemies could read their minds and predict their every move. In a way, they were right. Chun's fleet appeared wherever the Council races least expected them. Her ships materialized out of hyperspace, just as alien fleets were moving to attack each other. Sometimes they helped one side destroy the other. Sometimes they watched from a distance as aliens killed each other without human intervention. The psychological effect was more important than the military damage. Turner's consciousness existed in so many places at once that she sometimes forgot which body she was using to speak. She had backup copies of her mind in hidden bases throughout the galaxy and infiltrator copies in alien computer networks. She could die 100 times and still continue working on her projects. Death had become just another tool for her to use. The Council's emergency session on Sanctuary Prime was their last desperate attempt to restore order. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to address what they called the human contamination. They had no idea that Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell and her infiltration team had been working on the station for months, replacing maintenance workers and security guards one by one. Mitchell listened to the alien debates through dozens of hidden microphones while her team prepared for the final phase of the operation. The Council representatives were arguing about whether humans were really back or if they were fighting an enemy that existed only in their own paranoid minds. Some aliens insisted that the ghost attacks were just natural disasters and equipment failures that they were interpreting as enemy action. The debate was interrupted when Admiral Hayes herself appeared on every screen in the council chambers. Her enhanced face looked human, but her eyes glowed with the light of advanced technology. She spoke in calm, clear words that every alien could understand in their own language. She told them that humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as gardeners. The galaxy would be reshaped according to human principles. Species that could learn to cooperate would be allowed to thrive. Those that insisted on domination and genocide would be removed. The council races had taught humanity an important lesson about what happened to species that grew too comfortable with power. The aliens listening to her broadcast finally understood the scope of their mistake. They had not just failed to destroy humanity. They had created something far more dangerous than the species they had originally feared. The emergency session on Sanctuary Prime was supposed to be the most secure location in the galaxy. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered in the council chambers to address the crisis that was tearing their civilization apart. They had no idea that the cleaning staff, the security guards, and even some of their own advisors were humans who had been dead for 50 years. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood in the maintenance tunnels beneath the great chamber and listened to the desperate voices above her. The aliens were finally beginning to understand what they were facing, but it was far too late to stop what was coming. Her infiltration team had been preparing for this moment for months, slowly replacing key personnel throughout the station. Admiral Hayes had planned this revelation carefully. Instead of continuing to hide and strike from the shadows, humanity would show itself to the galaxy all at once. Every sleeper agent, every infiltrated system, every stolen ship would simultaneously declare their presence. The universe would learn that humans had not just survived extinction, but had thrived because of it. Commander Paul Jackson led the diversionary fleet that appeared at the edge of Sanctuary Prime's solar system. His ships looked damaged and desperate, like the last survivors of a defeated race making a final hopeless attack. The council fleets moved to intercept what they thought were the remaining humans, while the real operation began across 1,000 worlds. Jackson's crews were volunteers who knew they would probably die in the diversion. But death had lost its terror for humans who could be backed up and restored in new bodies. They fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose because they truly had nothing left to lose. Their sacrifice would buy time for the main operation to succeed. The revelation began exactly at midnight Council Standard Time. Major Grace Thompson's recorded message played simultaneously from every communication device in known space. Her voice echoed from military computers, civilian entertainment systems, and even personal communication devices. There was no escape from her words. She told the galaxy that they had been wrong about human extinction. The species they thought they had destroyed had instead learned to defeat death itself. Humans had infiltrated every level of alien society and now controlled systems that the council races did not even know existed. The extinct species had become the puppet masters of the galaxy. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. On the Vex-High homeworld, crystal beings looked at their trusted colleagues with new suspicion. How many of their friends and advisors were actually human minds in alien bodies? The paranoia that had been building for months exploded into open panic as aliens turned on each other. Captain Rodriguez broadcast the truth from the heart of Kalari space while his ship sat invisible in their most secure system. He explained how human consciousness could be transferred between bodies and backed up across multiple locations. The insects tried to trace his signal, but he was speaking from inside their own communication network, using their own equipment against them. Dr. Turner's voice came from within the Kalari hive mind itself, speaking directly into the shared consciousness that connected all their drones. She told them how humans had learned to hack biological neural networks just as easily as computer systems. The collective mind that had been their greatest strength was now their greatest weakness. The scope of human infiltration became clear as agents revealed themselves across the galaxy. Supply depot commanders who had been trusted for years admitted they were human. Military advisors who had helped plan anti-human strategies confessed that they had been working for humanity all along. Even some alien family members revealed that they were human minds in borrowed bodies. The Council's response was exactly what Hayes had predicted. They turned on each other with a savagery that impressed even the humans who had orchestrated it. Each species accused the others of being compromised. Ancient alliances crumbled in hours as trust evaporated throughout their civilization. The Mordon declared martial law and began executing anyone they suspected of human infiltration. They used their psychic powers to probe the minds of their own people, but human consciousness backed up in quantum matrices was invisible to their mental scans. They ended up killing thousands of their own citizens, while the real human agents watched and took notes. The Vex-High began destroying their own crystal networks in desperate attempts to purge human influence. Each purge eliminated vital infrastructure and killed more of their own people than any human attack had ever managed. Their beautiful crystal cities went dark, one by one, as they sacrificed their own civilization to fight an enemy they could not identify. The Kelari split into warring factions as different hive clusters accused each other of harboring human infiltrators. The unity that had made them strong for millions of years shattered in days. Queen turned against Queen, while human agents encouraged the conflicts from positions of trust within each faction. Mitchell and her team watched the chaos from their positions throughout Sanctuary Prime. The council representatives were screaming at each other in dozens of different languages, while their own security forces prepared to arrest them on suspicion of being human agents. The greatest deliberative body in galactic history was dissolving into madness and recrimination. Hayes observed the destruction from Resurrection Station and felt a mixture of satisfaction and regret. The council races had brought this on themselves with their attempted genocide, but watching civilizations tear themselves apart was not something any human could enjoy. Still, it was necessary. The galaxy needed to learn that some actions had consequences that could never be undone. The military situation deteriorated as quickly as the political one. Council fleets that had been moving to attack human targets suddenly turned their weapons on each other. Vex-High ships fired on Kelari vessels they suspected of being controlled by humans. Morden commanders ordered strikes against anyone who questioned their loyalty. Jackson's diversionary fleet found itself in the strange position of watching their enemies destroy each other without human intervention. Council ships that had been hunting them moments before were now hunting each other. The diversion had worked better than anyone had hoped. Chun's main fleet emerged from hiding and began securing strategic systems that the Council forces had abandoned in their panic. Human ships took control of trade routes and communication hubs, while the aliens were too busy fighting each other to resist. The extinct species was claiming its inheritance from the chaos of its former enemies. Turner's ultimate breakthrough came when she successfully transferred human consciousness into the Council's central command computers. The artificial intelligences that coordinated galactic civilization were now run by human minds that had experienced death and resurrection. They would ensure that the old order could never return. The war was ending not because humanity had conquered their enemies, but because their enemies had conquered themselves. The council races, consumed by paranoia and fear, had become their own worst enemies. They had learned too late that humans were the species that turned every setback into an opportunity, and every defeat into a lesson. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Lisa Hayes walked through the corridors of what had once been the council chambers on Sanctuary Prime. The building was now called New Geneva and served as the capital of a very different kind of galactic government. The alien delegates, who sat in the Great Hall, were no longer the proud rulers of space-spanning empires. They were the survivors of civilizations that had destroyed themselves in paranoia and fear. The war had ended 6 months ago, though calling it a war was not quite accurate. The final battles had been fought between Council forces attacking each other, while human ships watched from a safe distance. The extinct species had won by convincing their enemies to defeat themselves. It was the most human victory imaginable. Colonel Nick Foster submitted his final infiltration report from his original human body. He had spent 2 years wearing alien faces and living alien lives, slowly poisoning their civilizations from within. Now he could be himself again, though the experience had changed him in ways that would take time to understand. He had learned to think like a crystal being and feel like an insect. The boundaries between species had become fluid in his mind. The scope of human infiltration had been revealed in the aftermath. 47 major worlds had been controlled by human agents without their inhabitants knowing it. Thousands of ships had been commanded by people the aliens trusted completely. Entire governments had been taking orders from advisors who were actually human minds in alien bodies. Captain Amy Chun's fleet now patrolled the trade routes that connected the remaining alien worlds. Her ships bore new symbols that represented not conquest but protection. The phoenix rising from quantum flames had become the sign of the new galactic order. Any ship that flew under that symbol was guaranteed safe passage regardless of what species crewed it. The transition had not been smooth for everyone. Some alien species had chosen to retreat to their home systems rather than accept human leadership. Others had requested human consciousness backup technology for themselves, unwilling to face mortality now that an alternative existed. A few had even volunteered to have their minds merged with human consciousness to create something entirely new. Dr. Sophie Turner existed in so many forms now that the concept of individual identity had lost meaning for her. Her consciousness flowed through quantum networks that spanned the galaxy, thinking with the combined power of human creativity and alien computing systems. She had become something that transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial intelligence. Her greatest achievement was not the resurrection technology that had saved humanity. It was proving that consciousness could exist independently of any specific biological form. Death had become optional, not just for humans, but for any species willing to embrace the technology. The galaxy was slowly learning to see mortality as a choice rather than an inevitable fate. Major Alex Sullivan commanded the peacekeeping forces that maintained order during the transition. His enhanced soldiers were no longer weapons of war, but guardians of a new kind of civilization. They protected alien refugees from the chaos their own leaders had created, and ensured that no species would ever again attempt genocide against another. The psychological transformation was as important as the political one. The aliens had learned that humans were not just another species, but something fundamentally different. They were creatures who refused to accept limitations and treated every impossibility as a challenge to overcome. The galaxy was slowly adapting to the idea that the old rules no longer applied. Captain Paul Rodriguez led exploration missions to systems that had been abandoned during the chaos. His invisible ships mapped the ruins of civilizations that had torn themselves apart and rescued survivors who had been left behind. The human fleet had become an instrument of mercy rather than war, though their weapons remained ready for any species that might threaten the new order. The former council races struggled to understand their new reality. The Vexhi had lost most of their crystal networks, but the survivors were learning to think as individuals rather than as part of a collective consciousness. The Kalari hives were slowly reuniting under human guidance, discovering that cooperation was possible without the rigid hierarchy that had defined them for millions of years. The Mordon had suffered the most severe psychological trauma. Their ancient pride had been shattered by the revelation that the young humans had outmaneuvered them completely. Some had retreated into mental isolation, while others sought to learn human philosophy and technology. A few had even requested to have their consciousness backed up and enhanced with human improvements. Admiral Hayes reviewed reports from across the galaxy and felt a mixture of pride and responsibility that weighed heavily on her enhanced mind. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not just survived extinction, but had used that experience to reshape civilization itself. The question now was whether they could govern as wisely as they had fought. New Galactic Charter was simple in concept, but revolutionary in practice. Every species would have equal representation in the governing council, but with one absolute requirement that could never be negotiated. No species would ever again attempt to exterminate another. The penalty for genocide would be the complete dissolution of the offending civilization. Humans would serve as the enforcers of this new order, but not as dictators. Their role was to ensure that the galaxy never again saw the kind of systematic destruction that had nearly ended their own species. They had learned from their own near extinction that diversity was not just beneficial, but essential for the long-term survival of any civilization. The technological revolution was just beginning. Human consciousness transfer technology was being carefully shared with species that demonstrated they could use it responsibly. The ability to back up minds and transfer consciousness between bodies was transforming how aliens thought about death, identity, and the meaning of existence itself. Some philosophical problems remained unsolved. If a consciousness could exist in multiple bodies simultaneously, which one was the real person? If memories could be edited and personalities could be modified, what made someone truly themselves? These questions would challenge galactic civilization for generations to come. Turner's final gift to the galaxy was the most profound. She had learned to merge different types of consciousness together, creating hybrid minds that combined the best qualities of multiple species. Human creativity merged with Vexi logic, Kalari cooperation, and Morgan wisdom to create something entirely new. The galaxy was becoming something that had never existed before. A true galactic civilization where death was optional, where species boundaries were fluid, and where extinction was impossible, because consciousness could always be preserved and restored. It was the future that humanity had always dreamed of, born from their own brush with extinction. Years later, when young beings of many species learned galactic history, they studied the Great Extinction War as the turning point when civilization learned to transcend its biological limitations. They learned about the species that had been so stubborn that they refused to stay dead, and so determined that they turned their own extinction into the foundation of a better universe. The Council had tried to kill humanity because they feared what humans might become. They never imagined that by trying to destroy them, they would force humans to become something far more wonderful and terrible than anyone had ever dreamed possible. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not military or technological, but philosophical. They had proven that any setback, even extinction itself, could be overcome with enough determination and creativity. When the universe said no, humanity had simply replied with "watch us," and the galaxy was still watching in amazement.